is President Trump speaking from the White House press briefing room. After a brief moment of silence, he pretty immediately made this political, blaming DEI and the Democrats on that mid-air collision without providing evidence. He was a little bit all over the map, talking about DEI policies in the FAA, but then questioning the helicopter and the altitude and why it didn't, in his words, stop or make another move. I want to go to our experts, including our CNN aviation correspondent Pete Montine and CNN's Renee Marsh. Pete, bottom line, are DEI policies at the FAA to blame?
I put my head in my hands, Pam, when the president said that. This is something that has been pushed by the far right for a few months now, that DEI policies are to blame in a degradation of safety in aviation in the United States. But frankly, the president is getting out ahead of his skis here. What he has said is not only unprofessional, unpresidential, inconsiderate of the status of this investigation, but frankly, it is just unhinged. That he could even say with any sort of certainty that diversity, equity, and inclusion policies had any part to play in this accident. Remember that 67 people are dead. I hate to get so upset here, but this is something that investigators will really need to pick apart piece by piece, and that is going to take some really significant time. We're not even 24 hours after this crash. We're barely even 12 hours after this crash. And he is saying with a lot of certainty that the blame is on DEI, and the blame is in some ways on air traffic control and air traffic controller hiring. I have to feel for the air traffic controllers in the tower at Reagan National Airport who had to essentially sit there helplessly and make the call to first responders to say we have a serious aircraft crash at 8:48 last night. Let's parse out some more of this, because it's really significant here that President Trump also put some of the blame on Democrats. He said that Transportation Secretary, now former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, engaged in BS. He actually used the full word live on television. The fact of the matter is that Transportation Secretary Buttigieg was very hard on aviation safety. There was a day-long safety stand down because of the rise of near collisions on the runways at commercial airports nationwide that really took off in 2023. I did a sit-down interview with Buttigieg. He was well-versed on the topic. He knew the points. He knew where the blind spots were, and the FAA and the Department of Transportation from the top down of the Biden administration was taking that problem very seriously. He also was incredibly hard on airlines and consumer protections. The big bottom line here is that there are so many vacancies in the federal government when it comes to aviation safety. There is no administrator of the FAA right now. President Trump has not put somebody forth for that. There is no administrator of the Transportation Security Administration. The Trump administration needs to put somebody forth for that as well. Sean Duffy is the Transportation Secretary. He spoke articulately. I will point out that I did not hear from NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy, who was in the press room. That is really significant, especially during something like this. It is a huge tragedy, and I do not use that word lightly.
It is a huge tragedy. We still don't have the answers. As our Caitlin Collins asked him, President Trump, aren't you getting ahead of this investigation because we don't have those answers? And when he was pressed further about how he can blame DEI, when he also can say in the same sentence he doesn't know if it's the air traffic controller's fault, raising questions about the helicopter pilot, he said it's just common sense. But again, what we need to remember here are there are 67 families who are mourning because of this mid-air collision, who are looking for answers, who don't want politics, they want answers, and they are mourning the loss of their loved ones. And that is what we need to remember in this moment.
And following the breaking news on the devastating mid-air collision between an American Airlines passenger jet and a military Black Hawk helicopter, first I want to show you live pictures of the Potomac River. First responders have been working tirelessly since last night, overnight, to recover bodies from the frigid waters in the Potomac River. Tragically, all 67 people on board the two aircraft are presumed to have perished, making this the deadliest aviation disaster in the United States in more than 20 years. As this is happening, the President of the United States went into the White House briefing room and almost immediately began to blame Democrats for the diversity programs that were in place, suggesting, as he admitted without evidence, that perhaps there is a connection between that and what you are looking at.
I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse. They have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it. But we'll restore faith in American air travel. I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing.
I just want to emphasize what you're looking at is live. This is just a few miles down the road from the White House. The bodies of the 67 people believed to have perished are still being fished out of the Potomac River, the icy Potomac River, when we heard that from the President of the United States and from other senior members of his cabinet. In addition to some words of condolence and remorse and prayers for some of them. I do want to get straight to CNN's chief White House correspondent, Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, you were among those questioning the president. One of the things that really struck me was when some of the really legitimate, important questions about what basis he had for calling out these DEI programs in general, but particularly at this time. And his answer was common sense.
Yeah, Dana, this was President Trump's first time inside the White House briefing room since he took office this time. And he came out here, took a moment of silence for the victims here. We know there are 67 people who were on board both of these aircraft. Neither are expected to have any survivors. And moments after that, though, the president cast a wide array of blame on multiple targets, including the person who was in office before him, President Biden, the former transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg, Democrats generally, DEI policies, and also on multiple occasions, the pilot of that U.S. military Black Hawk helicopter, essentially arguing that they were in the wrong place at the wrong time and saying that something could have been done differently there. Now, I should note, we were sitting in here in the briefing room. We heard from the Vice President J.D. Vance, the newly sworn in Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. We did not hear from the chair of the National Transportation Safety Board, Jennifer Homendy, who was sitting right there in those chairs, or the new acting FAA administrator who has been named presumably in the last few hours, because before that there had been no administrator at the FAA in this position. The person who was in that position before left before Trump took office, and right now the head of the FAA is vacant, the deputy head of the FAA is vacant, the head of the TSA is vacant, and the deputy head of the TSA is also vacant. And so all of these questions about staffing and what could have played a factor here is very much still under investigation, Dana, as the president came out here and was casting blame. One thing I noted was that there are still bodies being pulled from the water of the Potomac right now. We know from officials that we heard from earlier that that rescue and that recovery operation is very much still underway in some really difficult conditions that first responders were dealing with last night. Now, there are big questions about what this investigation looks like going forward and what happens next year. But the president using this moment to also cast blame on multiple targets, including hiring practices, he said, within the air traffic control system. Now, this investigation, to state the obvious, is nowhere near done yet, and we do not have any indication, and we did not hear from the head of the NTSB during this briefing on what they believe could have been here. When Trump was asked if he had seen any evidence to back up what he was saying, he said, Dana, that he was just using common sense.